So in today's video, we are going to be looking at how to find properties for sale in CH1, which is a postcode district in the area of Chester. So who's this video for? Well, it's for buy-to-let landlords, it's for property investors, it's for you if you're looking for three types of properties really. So primarily for the strategy of buy-to-let, and also primarily looking for properties that are either in good condition, so they're ready to let out, or maybe some value add potential. So maybe a mini refurb, slight change of layout, even some planning gains potentially. But we're going to keep it very simple. This is the first step of shortlisting properties, and it's the first phase really of trying to build a potential list of opportunities that you can then go out and view, speak to the agents about, and then really narrow down to the right properties to place some offers on. So I'll keep it super simple in terms of the steps, I'll keep it super simple in terms of the location, and we'll go straight into it. So we've got currently set up here Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market. They're the three main property portals across the UK. What you find though is that some properties may be on one portal and not on another. So unfortunately, if you're doing this correctly, you are going to be using all three portals to try and find the full opportunities. But let's get started. So CH1 for sale, and then we're going to keep all of this criteria the same at the moment, and I'll explain kind of why in the next stage. We'll just simply go to find properties. And then you can do this on every single portal. And then finally, we'll do it here as well. And there's a reason why we're looking for postcode districts. So specifically in this video, CH1. And I'll first explain about the total size of the market. Then we'll look at the potential opportunities in the market. So we're looking, and you can see here, this map outline at one particular postcode district. If we go for the whole of Chester in this example, it's going to be too broad. They're going to have loads of different properties. It's hard to narrow down a short list when you get so many opportunities. It can take a long time, or you might miss some potential. So we're just going to do each individual location across different stages. And what I'd recommend is focusing on one postcode first, do your original shortlist, then go to the next postcode after that. So CH1 in Rightmove, currently the size of the market is 277 properties. That's all properties, no filters, no sort criteria, just everything that's showing on the portal. Zoopla, 91 properties, on the market 188. So you can see there's quite a sizable difference between them, and it will change depending on your location and the area that you're looking at, which location has the most kind of properties. So back to Rightmove. The next stage of this is really narrowing down and improving your filters. So if we go to filters here, we're going to take out new home, buying schemes, and retirement home. We're going to leave include under offer at the moment. There's different reasons why you might use that filter, which we've gone through in other videos, and I'll put some links in this video if you wanted to try and shortcut to that particular process. If we go to done, and you can see here that's narrowed it down to 233, and we'll do the same filters on the other portals, and they use typically the same terminology. So you can see here include, exclude. We can leave auction in. Just going to update results there. You can see that's taken it down to 79. And then finally on the market, include under offer, we're going to keep out. Only show, don't show. Terminology here is a bit more confusing, but what we're going to take out is don't show and apply that. Okay, so we've got 233, 79 and 148 properties for sale in this postcode district of CH1. And that's going to be some similar properties on Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market. You'll see the same properties, so it's not going to be each of those portals combined, but we'll start with Rightmove here. Once we've got this, we're going to do an improvement on the sort filters and choose lowest price. Now at the top of these listings, you'll find things like this: feature property, sponsored property, different terminologies used, but essentially they're paid ads where they'll fit most of the criteria, but might not be the lowest price. And if we scroll down here, you can see it's a bit more of an example there. That's 29,000, that's 175,000. So we'd usually ignore the ones at the top of the property listings if we're just focusing on price. But in this strategy, we're simply looking at shortlisting interesting properties. So buy-to-lets that could be in good condition, could need some work, could be potential value add, and this property might be a fit for that. So in this particular process, in this particular shortlist, we will use it, we will keep it the same. So once we've set the filters, once we've improve the filters, and once we've improved the sort criteria, the next step is going to be looking at listing the potential properties. And there's two ways to do this. You can use this list function or this map function, and we're going to use both, but for slightly different reasons. So looking at the list function, and I'm simply just going to go now from top to bottom through these 233 listings, and I'll pick out the things that I think are most relevant. We're not here looking at the best yields or looking at the best location in terms of is CH1 better than CH2 or M21 or any other postcode, this assumes that you know the area you want to look in, and it assumes that you've got an ideal price range. You can certainly change that on the filter set as well, but we're going to be quite broad and open on this particular filter. So 3 things I'm looking at: images, description, and we've got types of properties, bedrooms and bathrooms here. Now 233 properties can be quite confusing to go through in one list. If you're in an area that's a bit smaller or maybe really competitive, there's not many properties on the market, what I'd usually recommend is an additional step here where you can select the type of property. So we're going to select flat here. You can see that takes it down to 105. If we were to select terrace, that'll take us down to 58. So it's a bit more manageable. It's a bit easier to try and go through that list. And then if we go back to flat, what we're going to do here for our search is chunk it down into different steps. So we'll do this search for flats on Rightmove for properties for sale in CH1. And then we'll move to looking at terraces. Same portal, same location. And then semi-detached houses, and then detached houses if that's part of your criteria. And then you build a shortlist like that. Very simple. So here, again, looking at images, we're looking at the description, we're looking at maybe the number of bedrooms and bathrooms to see if that kind of fits the criteria. What you might also find is we've got here in this filter list not to show buying schemes, new homes, retirement homes. And buying schemes would usually mean shared ownership, things like that. But you've got in this description a 25% share in a second floor bedroom, 2-bedroom flat. So that's why it's such a low price. That's not going to be suitable for most standard buy-to-let investors and landlords. So we wouldn't include that in our shortlist. This particular one here, pictures look okay. It's certainly not going to be a refurb property. It's got good condition, nice pictures. And when it comes to kind of description, there's some things that might kind of jump out, but not always lots. So at this stage, I'm not going to include this because although it could be an amazing opportunity in terms of the condition of the property, the type of property it is, there's nothing really that sets it apart from another property that we might find. The only thing I can see here is this property's been reduced recently. That could be interesting. So I might come back to that later, but I'm just going to ignore that currently. Ignore that one. Auction sale, 59,000. That's interesting in terms of the price. It's a student property. It's got a rental income here and it's going to auction. Maybe worth a shout, that one, to add to the list. See, quite small. These are student properties, which is why there's nothing here in terms of the size of this particular property. And we're trying to have a fast process of doing this listing. So we're not going to be going into every single link, clicking on every single one. By doing it this way, you might miss some opportunities. So you might prefer to go into the descriptions. For me, when I'm doing this sort listing, I just want to try and keep it quite simple at the beginning. Investment opportunity, interesting, already part of an apartment block for students, recently reduced, again, maybe one that's interesting. And the reason why I'd list that one rather than this one is this specifically jumps out and says in the description, investment opportunity. There's a couple of things for that. One, is it going to limit the type of buyers? So it's not going to be a homeowner that's going to be looking at that property. It's going to be a buy-to-let landlord. That's both good and bad. When you come to sell that property, if you were the owner, you've got a limited market. But when you come to buy it, you're going to be one of a few potential investors that are looking at that over and above maybe other buyers. You might be able to therefore get it for an okay price. You can see here it's already been reduced, maybe worth adding and adding to the shortlist. Now, typically, it's quite a lot of studio properties adding here, and studios aren't necessarily my preferred property type. I'm adding them here because there is a couple of things that maybe stand out. This particular one here, though, was reduced a longer time ago. Less interesting in that respect. I prefer to favour one that's been maybe reduced more recently. Northgate Point, again, reduced a longer time ago. Studio, there's quite a few studios in these locations. I'm probably going to skip over some of these studios now because we don't want too many in that listing. This one's interesting. Reduced a while ago. It's got a tenant in situ with an 8% yield. That's pretty good. Pictures look like they might have been taken before the tenant moved in. Looks like it could do with some work. So it seems to be a relatively low price compared to everything else. These are all studio apartments. These are now coming into what looks like more traditional one-bedroom apartments. So price-wise, it's on the lower end. Tenant in situ, good yield. Worth looking at. Worth having a conversation with the letting agents and the selling agents for sure on that one. Nothing really there. That's quite a large lounge. That's quite interesting in terms of size. Might indicate decent-sized bedrooms. I'd add that initially and maybe have a relook at it later on. Terrible description. There's not much in there, which is unusual. Vacant. Pictures are okay. Looks condition wise okay. Some unusual pictures, unusual description. I would actually add that. And the reason being is that it was added recently. It's not got the best of information, which can sometimes put off other buyers. But for us, could be worth looking at. Certainly worth adding to the shortlist. We can come back to it later if it's not suitable and remove it. 1-bedroom apartment, investors only. Not sure yet why it's investors only. Maybe it's because it's only for a cash buyer. Maybe because it's currently tenanted, reduced recently, sold by an agent that's not from Chester by the looks of it. So listed agent is in Leeds, properties in Chester. Curious as to why that might be, so I'd add that one. Properties with parking space, I really like, especially off-road parking with apartments. It's not always guaranteed in city centre locations, so that can be sometimes a really nice benefit. Looks really small. I'm curious as to that one for the parking space, but I'm unsure about the size, so I'd look at the description slightly later on that one, but I'm going to add it for now. And now we're getting into a different price range. So we started off anywhere from sort of 60s to 80s in studios, then 110 seemed to be the baseline for 1-bedroom apartments. We're now moving up to a higher price range, 130, still 1-bedrooms. And this can really impact the yield. This can really impact sort of the location as well. You typically get a much better location. But this one here, 128, Weatherby Close, 130. Investment property, that was reduced a while ago. That was added after the price reduction of the other one, just slightly lower. So they're going on just under this one here at 130. That's interesting. You could add that one if you really liked Weatherby Close's location. You'd certainly view both of them. I'm going to leave that one off this list currently, and it might be one you come back to later on. A lot of the pictures are starting to look quite similar in terms of apartments. Nothing too exciting. It's quite difficult to try and spot specific outliers at this stage. 140,000 for a 2-bed. These are 1-beds. So we're now at the base price range for the 2-beds, and then they start to increase from there. So 140,000, that's a 1-bed. Still, this is another 2-bed, and that's 145. So I'd be curious on this one. We're acting in the sale of a property and have received an offer of 137. Any interested parties must submit higher offers. Okay, so this to me looks like it might be a repossession. It's unusual for the estate agent to show the offer that they've already had on the property, but they're required to do that when it's a repossession property. So if you spot things like that in the description, that's well worth looking at, and that's why we do these two different methods. So we look at the list because you see more detail, and then we look at the map separately in a second. So I would add that one. It might be that it's already progressed so long in the sale that another offer, especially anywhere near the current offer, won't be fully considered by the seller. But it's worth looking at, and certainly because it's a lower price range of the 2-beds in the area, it gives us a nice starting point to compare later on. And then we've gone here to other 2-beds. This one I would also add. A couple of reasons for that. Looks like a decent size. Looks like it's in relatively good condition, so minor, if any, works are going to be needed on it by the looks of it. And it's, apart from this potential repossession property, which is 137 offer, this one's the nearest kind of price, so worth having a look at. Added at the end of last year, so added a while ago. Doesn't look like it's had any price reductions. Not sure if it's still vacant. When you consider a vacant property, every single month the costs are going to be adding up for that seller, and it's going to be maybe more, or they're going to be more inclined to potentially take an offer. So well worth considering and looking at for that. Not always guaranteed, but the longer they've been on the market for, the more likely that could be the case that they take an offer. These are 1-bedroom apartments now. Look okay, but the price range compared to the previous 1-beds and nothing else jumping out in the description, I wouldn't tend to add those. And then we just continue our search down there. I'm going to skip over the 1-bedrooms now and just focus on the 2-beds. I'm looking for specific things that jump out in the description. There's nothing here that to me sparks massive interest. This one's a bit more unusual. It's a studio apartment priced in the same price range as the 2-bedrooms. So I can imagine that's not going to get anywhere near the same level of interest. It was reduced recently. In the description, it mentions a couple of things like river view. Whether you know the location or not, things like that are usually quite unusual in most areas, and there might be a limited number of properties that fit that criteria, so they can sometimes fetch a premium. Pictures look okay. Massive bonus of private gated parking. That is usually a bonus, especially city centre locations. That might be priced correctly. It might be overpriced compared to the other property opportunities. I'd add it, and then I'd look at it later on and look for a little bit more detail in the description and see if it's one that's worth focusing on for viewing. Investors only, property currently let. Okay, great. Now, normally this would jump out at me because it might give us a bit of an interest as to, okay, it's suitable for an investor. already tenanted, so a homeowner's not likely to buy it. Maybe you can get it at a good price for that reason, and or maybe it's just a perfect property for an investor, and the tenant could be great, could be a really good yield. And this one, however, let at 875, and it's on the market for 160,000. So the yield on that one's going to be quite poor compared to that same rental 875. And if you could buy the property, some of the ones above that are 2 bedrooms, if they rented for similar, but they're 140, you're going to get a much better yield. So I'd be missing that one currently. I wouldn't be looking at that too much and adding that to the list. Things like this jump out to me. It's a bit more unusual. Like a lot of the buildings that we've been looking at here for the apartments are very similar. They're new build apartments. They are of a similar style, nothing much to kind of distinguish them. So buyers are going to be competing on location and price, and maybe some information in the description, like we saw before with the river views. And this one, however, more unique, more unusual. Looks like a conversion from a historic building. We click through the videos or pictures. What you'll find in conversions is they are maybe sometimes too quirky, but more of a quirky layout, which can be good or bad. Fixtures, fittings, condition is all going to be variable. It's all changeable anyway. It's more about, is there any interesting features that the property could have over and above its competitors, like these types of properties above. So this one here, it's only a 1 bedroom and it's 165,000. I'd be curious on that one. I don't think it's necessarily one that's going to be a perfect fit for a buy-to-let landlord, because typically you'd be focusing on yield and income. This is a much higher price than the other ones, but I like the fact that it's different in terms of style than some of the others. So I'm going to save that into the list. And again, just because we're saving them into the list doesn't mean we're going to view them, doesn't mean we're going to offer on them, and doesn't mean it's going to be the property that ends up making the shortcut later on down the line. What we're trying to do here is go from what we had originally, which is 277 properties, down to a more manageable number for our next pass at shortlisting. And that manageable number is depending on the person. You could be looking for 5, right? Or you could be looking at 10, 20, some more simpler number, let's say, to reduce down to. Same again, interesting style, a lot more unusual than some of the other properties, just more interesting. That is a really unusual picture. Looks like it might be some sort of kind of balcony looking out over the city. Even new build apartments can have balconies, so that's not in itself its only selling point, but yeah, just looks a bit more unusual, shall we say. Unique character building located down in quiet street in the city centre. Great. Those sort of things to me really stand out. They typically do well over a longer period of time. They can attract different types of buyers, and they can attract different types of tenants in a good way. So I typically add that. Rental yield might not be brilliant compared to some of the other properties that we're looking at, because we're going up in price range now and we're starting to move away from some of the better yielding properties. So for me, in this location now for CH1, I'm probably out of the range of these are the best properties for that area. Just go back up to this top of this list. This is an interesting one, secure basement car parking space, but it's only a 1 bedroom, it's 180. I think there's some of the properties that we've got in that list that are maybe a bit more of an interesting fit for that. This is a really interesting building, 1 bedroom. I like that one as well, so let's add that one. And then I'd probably bring that shortlist to a close for apartments and then move on to a different property type. So let's go to Terrace. Take off flats, go to done. Great, we've got 59 here. So now we're going to be looking at apartments, all different types of price range. You can, of course, reduce down your price range to a more manageable figure that works for you. We're looking at 59 properties here. So 59 properties that are terrace houses for sale in CH1 in Chester. Starting with this top one, that's going to be a bit different to the others that we're going to be looking at because it's a feature property. So it goes to the top of the list in terms of the criteria for the portal. But I quite like this in terms of potential to add value. Looks like an interesting refurb project, quite a straightforward type house. These types of buildings internally are usually really straightforward to refurb. Famous last words. Who knows what it is until you get inside, but this one could be interesting. So I've added that one. 3 bedroom as well, 175, and reduced recently. So a couple of interesting signs there. I like 3 bedrooms. I like houses with gardens, and I like houses with off-road parking as well with gardens. They're a really good fit for longer term tenants. Resale to homeowners, interesting for investors, typically tick a lot of the boxes, so quite like that. Can I write that one? Again, we've got a couple of refurb type opportunities coming up here. These are really good for a couple of reasons. One, because you can add value, which is great. You can increase the potential rental yield that you'd get, the potential value of the asset, which is all good. 2, it also allows you to make some changes to the property that can add value that makes sense. But when you're buying a property and it might be in okay condition, and the seller's maybe not quite as motivated, they might not take into account that it needs repainting, carpets, some new electrical works, maybe a new boiler, and those can really add up. They can really increase the cost that or the investment that you need to put into that property. Whereas if you've got a property that definitely needs a refurb, usually the agents and the sellers are a little bit more conscious and aware of that, and the price will reflect that. So you can actually do the works, you can add the value and still buy it at the right kind of price to make that make sense. So that one looks interesting to me. It's at the lower end, it's at the kind of lowest price listing that's coming up for terrace houses, and it needs a refurb as well, so it ticks the boxes there. Now, not every investor is going to be looking for refurb opportunities. Many investors that we work with look for properties that are in good condition, maybe even tenanted, maybe with management in place, or just gone through a refurbishment. Sometimes even new build properties that are going through the build phase and aren't going to be ready for maybe a year's time, but they know it's going to be a brand new build development, and those types of properties can work great and work really well for investors. So it's not always about looking for refurb opportunities, but in this particular shortlisting approach, that's why we're highlighting them, because they jump out for different reasons. So this one next, 2-bed terrace, guide price 145 to 135. Guide prices always interest me for listings. I don't necessarily see anybody looking at that guide price thinking, yeah, I'm going to pay the top of the guide price. Everybody's looking at kind of the lower end of the guide price. It can work well if you've got a really competitive market. It gives people an idea that actually it's going on at a lower price. It might not achieve that. It might be a higher price that it goes for, so be prepared to offer slightly higher. So I can see why they work, but it's not always necessarily the case that they get to the top of the guide price in terms of the offers. So bear that in mind when you are looking at them. This one here, I think it's tricky because I'm not a big fan of conservatories in lower value properties. This is a lower value in terms of it's at the top of the list on the lower value search criteria for this location. And the reason for that is because conservatories, maintenance wise, often need consistent maintenance, and there's going to be consistent work needed on them. They can be nice from a tenant's point of view. They're not necessarily going to add significant value on a lower price property. That in itself, though, shouldn't be a reason to make you interested or put you off. But the other reasons for kind of looking at this one is it's only a 2-bed. It looks okay condition, but I can imagine when you get into that property, if it was vacant and all of this stuff is kind of taken out, you are going to need to do some works to the property that are going to start to kind of add up. So I'd be curious as to what the price jumps are from this 2-bedroom terrace here to the next couple of 2-bedroom terraces and what their conditions are like. So if we scroll forward onto this one, for example, this is a 3-bedroom terrace, and this might be in a better location or worse location. We don't know fully at this stage. But to me, it just feels a bit of a simpler property in terms of internally. There might be some works you want to do to the property. This, for example, looks like a more dated shower tiles, and you might want to refresh that. But it looks tidy in terms of how it's been maintained internally and externally from the pictures anyway. It's been added today, so brand new listing, 3-bedroom, no one would chain, quite like that. I'd look to add that one as well. We're starting to now, and this is a 3-bed, and these are 2-beds. So we're starting to now push the price range in terms of the 2 beds for this location. So they're getting up to higher price ranges, which means the rental yields are going to be a little bit lower, assuming they rent out for the same price or similar price to the other properties. So just to speed this up slightly, I'm just going to skim over anything that really doesn't jump out. This one's good. This one's a 3-bedroom, some interesting tiles going on. So it looks like a nice refurb. Looks like not quite a corner plot. Maybe that's a road, but end terrace. I quite like corner plots. Not always the case, and certainly doesn't look like it's the case on this property, but you can do some interesting things with corner plots, especially on some higher value properties. It really makes sense, really worthwhile adding maybe extensions or even carving out some of the land separately. But this looks like a really interesting one. Yeah, there's no value here in terms of doing anything on the side here, although it is on a corner. It's just a road. All right, great. So added recently, 3-bed, full refurb required on that one by the looks of it. It looks quite a decent size, so quite like that. I'll add that one. Now we're starting to get into different styles. So we can see here, if we go back to the front, there we go. This size of building versus this size of building going to be very different. These buildings are usually a smaller internal footprint. So the size of the rooms in terms of width, height, length are typically smaller than some of these types of buildings. As soon as you start looking at Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian type properties, they can be great for houses as buy-to-lets, homeowners, potential to add value, usually strong, solid structure. Certainly there can be issues with some of those buildings. They're not brand new. They've got some age to them, but they can be really good for different reasons in terms of, like this one, for example. If we go into the pictures, refurb all day long. This has got what looks like off-road parking as well, which is good. And there's not loads of pictures internally, which I'm always curious about, because the more pictures that you've got internally, that's usually a sign of property looks amazing. There's loads of good shots that the agent can take. When there's only a couple, and here we've got pictures even including things like title plans and on the street nearby, that's usually a sign that there's very little that the agent can take internally. There's just maybe not many pictures that jump out, and this one looks like a full-on refurb by the looks of it. Guide price again, 150 to 160. 2 bedrooms, whereas we've even got things like 3 bedrooms here that are similar guide prices, also need works. But this one I think is worth adding because of the style of the property. Could give us a bit more of a end market if you're looking at selling, and potentially some more market internally to do some more scope internally, to do some refurbishment works in terms of improving floor layouts, extensions, maybe, depending upon the size of the property. On that one, it might not be the case, but they're worth adding and checking out further for sure. So back to 2 bedrooms here, 170, relatively straightforward mid-terrace. Could be a great one for a simple, looks like in good condition, tight kitchen, maybe smaller floor size, room sizes. You've only got literally one window at the bottom, one window at the top, typically an indication of a smaller footprint, and it does look like quite narrow here. You've got a window door, and you would usually see on the larger properties, if we were to scroll back up an example here, so although this is a 3 bed, go back to this one maybe here, you can see this bay window, much larger, this window here in the middle of the property, and then the door to the side, and then this additional kind of window to the side. So all of this house in this 2 bed property here versus this one here. So it's a much smaller size property. So this one, reduced recently, could be a great straightforward buy to let, smaller size. If you weren't looking to do works on the property, that one's relatively tidy, maybe worth adding. If you are looking to add value, I wouldn't say it's going to be the one. If you are looking for the highest rental yield, again, maybe not the right kind of one. There's a couple of other lower value properties, including apartments, that are a better fit potentially for that. This was the same property, I believe, as the one right at the top, which was the featured listing here. So 3 bed Fieldway on the market with Springbok. We scroll down, yeah, you can see the same kind of property, and we've already saved that one. And then we kind of continue to go, really. So anything that kind of jumps out here, this one added recently, reduced recently, 2 different agents, Darlington Crescent, same price, same images internally, although different image externally. One looks like it might be the rear, one looks like it might be the front of the property. So when an agent is selling the same property as another agent, so there's 2 agents essentially running that same listing, that's always interesting. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the best property or the best price. I'm not going to add it, but it's just something to note. It's something that is another indication that actually this property is somewhat interesting. Terrace house on the road, nothing here that's jumping out too much. This one looks okay, actually. I like this. We've got end terrace needing some work. It's only a 2 bed, and there's a couple of lower value 2 beds that we've got in that list, so it might be this price because of the location. Looks like a relatively straightforward property in terms of rear yard, maybe some on-road parking here. It's hard to know yet without looking at the description, but it looks like it might be the end of kind of the street, so sometimes can be quieter. Added a couple of months or so ago, no real price reduction, still on the market, now showing as a premium listing. Usually that's an indication that the agent's trying to get a bit more interest in the property. It might be that it needs a price reduction to be more appealing, and that's why it's not yet sold, but worth looking at, worth having a bit further view on. Okay, and now we're starting to get into the realms of better condition properties that are maybe more typical for straightforward buy-to-let, but also more interesting. So this one jumps out from a description point of view. Character filled extended cottage, chocolate block cottage, interesting, built in the 1700s. It's not a new property. It's going to require some maintenance and works over time if it's not already been done, but it looks like it's been looked after, good condition. I like that. I think it's quite an interesting one to maybe look at. Again, not necessarily the perfect rental yield, not necessarily the perfect buy, refurb and flip property. It doesn't fit that criteria. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, looks like a nice building, could be a really good fit for a homeowner. Reduced recently. It's always interesting why they've kind of been reduced when everything else looks decent. So maybe the price, maybe the location, maybe the market something there that's not fully jumping out, but I quite like that. I quite like the style of the building. I quite like a couple of the other features of the building as well. Now, for any of these price ranges here, I'd start to look at typically 3 bedrooms rather than 2 bedrooms. We're pushing the budget now compared to the other properties in the location. This one here does lead some works doing to it. I'm not sure if there's much scope in terms of the price of the property to do the works on it, but I like the style. I like the fact that it needs potentially some works doing to it. I'm a bit concerned that it's only a 2 bedroom and it's this kind of price. So there's other ways, which I'll show you in the map section, how we can try and kind of spot value opportunities in terms of the price they're on the market for. But we're going to add that one initially, but I think that's possibly one that's going to come off that list. So if we've got loads on the list, things like that on the second pass of shortlisting, I'd take off. I wouldn't necessarily keep that over the longer term. Okay, interesting. Ideal investment opportunity, 4 lettable rooms achieving 1432. So it looks like it's potentially a house of multiple occupation. I would add that typically because at the moment we don't know if it's a potential to add significant value to, don't know if there's potential to increase the rents, but the fact that it's 4 lettable rooms and a house of multiple occupation means that it's going to have only an investor buyer that's interested in it, and it's worth us having a look at it and seeing if it's got any potential for us versus some of the other properties. Similar again, tenanted by 4 students until August. Guide price of 140, similar to this one. I'd look to add that. Now, we've done houses of multiple occupation in the past, and we sell houses of multiple occupation as well, but they don't always fit for every single investor. Sometimes they can be harder to finance. Sometimes they can be harder to manage. You need a specialist letting agent to manage them. So there's more things to consider, but they can be really good for rental yield. They can be really good for increasing that cash flow and kind of income. Louise Street, 3 bedrooms, 250. There's nothing here really. Tidy enough property in terms of style and look. Doesn't look like it's going to be one to add much value to. And we're starting to push the budget now, I think, on this one. Things like here, 2-bedroom terrace. So I wouldn't add this from this list, but if we were doing this search in the map section, which we'll go on to in a second, and there was lots of properties nearby that are on market for 300,000, 320, 350, even higher, then I would definitely add this property. But in this particular list view, it's not really jumping out as anything specific that I'd be kind of adding at this stage. And the same again here. So I think from a terrace point of view, I think that's reached a good initial shortlist, a good pass. I'm going to move to semi-detached houses now, and we're starting to reduce the total number of properties now in this location. We've done the majority of the search initially. There seem to be more apartments in the area, then terraces, then some semis, and then maybe a handful of detached as well. So we've got here at the top again, featured property, and then it's got here the starting from the lower price. So just bear that in mind when we're doing this search. This one looks quite nice. I can't see though any way to significantly add value to this one. Could be a great property, could be a really good simple buy to let, but we've got other options I think for buy to lets at the moment that are going to be a better yield for a 3-bed than this one at 200,000. So this one's starting again at the lower price, so 130. We can see here 2-bed, looks like some interesting works required on it, reduced recently. Attention first time buyers and investors, 2-bed semi. Yeah, I like that. I like that one. This one we've added. It was shown as a townhouse. So interestingly, it came up in the search that we did for terraces, and it's also coming up in the search that we've done for semi-detached as well. So we'll skip that one. Okay, so I'm going to miss this one. There's a couple of reasons why. So when we're looking at it, it could fit the criteria for everything else that we're looking at. It's an end terrace house with what looks like a street kind of here coming down the side. There's no parking by the looks of it here because of these kind of lines here. Now there might be a parking space down the side, but we're doing a relatively quick pass at these properties. And if we have loads of opportunities, amazing. We don't need to kind of look for a million and different one properties because there's loads of different opportunities that you'll come across all the time. So we need to try and improve that speed. So when we're looking at this one here, there's things like this that are putting it off for me. And then when we look at internally, this looks very tight coming in here for this staircase. I'm not usually a fan of open staircases. You find sometimes open staircases, people will block them off. The problem with doing that is it reduces a lot of the light. And if you consider here, when you're coming in, if this is blocked off as a staircase, this is going to feel really narrow. And then you've got other issues where if this is fully blocked off as a wall and a corridor down to the front door, you've then got a really tight space here. So for me, instantly kind of just looking at a couple of the pictures there, I'd be put off from that from a landlord and an ongoing kind of maintenance and management perspective. So straight on to the next one. Decent size off-road parking. This is a proper kind of white box by the look of it internally. Like, there's not much character to it that's kind of jumping out. Some unusual things. Bay windows are pretty good. I like bay windows. You can see kind of here some unusual things in terms of the rooms. They don't look the best proportion in terms of spaces, and the size is kind of okay, but they feel like it could be quite dark if it wasn't all white. This room looks pretty good. You've got fitted wardrobes. That could be a really good sized bedroom. Looks like a good size already. You've got fitted wardrobes. So maybe it's just the first couple of pictures I put off by slightly. Going to the back, straightforward, easy to maintain. 2-bedroom semi-detached house. If we go up, we've not got loads of semi-detached houses that are kind of cheaper price range. So maybe, don't know, it's not jumping out to me, but I'm going to add it because it's at the lower price range, and it might be one that comes off the list later on. Nothing really here. Everything's feeling a bit kind of samey. Nothing in the pictures or the description that's really jumping out. You got something here, huge scope to modernise. Okay, so if we look through, it's not terrible. It's a bit dated, and it does look like a refurb. You've got off-road parking, decent sized garden at the back, a little bit of a garden at the front, which is nice. It's already an extended semi-detached 3-bedroom. Yeah, quite like that without him. Although, interestingly, then we come down to this one here. Sealand Road, looks like it's the same road. This is a 2-bedroom. This is a 3-bedroom. So this is slightly larger, but it might be that they've made a decision on this property, because it looks like it's gone through a refurb, and by the looks of it, quite an extensive refurb, that they've lost one of the rooms to make the other rooms larger. And sometimes people might do that, and then you can always put it back in the future if you wanted to. I think what's happened here, though, is this is an extended 3-bedroom semi, which has given them the extra bedroom. So ordinarily these houses are 2 bedrooms, and by the fact that these have already extended it, they've made a 3rd bedroom. Internally, this needs a refurb, whereas this already has it. It looks like it's got kind of extension here anyway, which is more downstairs living space rather than upstairs bedroom space. But they're not mildly different in terms of price range. So I'm going to add this, not because I think this is the one that we would end up purchasing, but I quite like to keep it as an example for this one in terms of proximity. So how close is it to this one? And in terms of an anchor point when we're looking at it for pricing, if we're speaking to the agent and the seller on this one, you could go into a very nice, by the looks of it, although 2-bedroom property for 250, or you've got a full refurb needed on this one for kind of 240, and 10,000 is not going to be anywhere enough to do this level of refurb on it. So it could be an anchor point to try and buy this one at a slightly better price, or even a price comparison that you know it's like, it's not worth buying because there's so much work I need to do on it compared to what's already on the market in good condition. So it helps to consider examples and similar properties like that. Semi-detached here, quite like the style of this one. Garage, always good. Garages are very limited now when it comes to most property types. It looks okay. 3-bedroom semi. It's interesting. It's not price-wise incredible compared to lots of other things. Maybe it is for the location that it's at, but it looks like an okay style. It looks like a very big house though. It looks like it's got this nice double-story extension at the back. There's a few things about that I quite like. I'm not sure if the price is good. It's also reduced a few months ago now, not too recently, but I'd look to add that one. I think that's quite an interesting. I think that's quite an interesting example. And then now we're starting to again get back into nice houses, but nothing that really is jumping out for us here. This is the only, if we scroll back up, the only 4-bedroom that we've come across. Price range significantly higher now than the other properties. Looks like a really nice property internally. I'm sure it'd make an amazing home. Rent yield on this one's going to be probably a little bit more limited, so not quite as high as some of the other properties. I wouldn't be adding that to our shortlist unless you're really looking for top end type properties, and this one fits the criteria for you. And that's the end of the page for that one. So finally, onto detached houses. We're not going to be looking at bungalows, land or park homes in this example. Bungalows could be a great one for refurbs. They can be a great one for adding value. They're quite limited in terms of number. They're quite limited sometimes in terms of resale, but for the right buyer, they can be amazing. And I know plenty of people that just focus on bungalows. That's their only strategy. But for rental yield, for buy-to-let properties, you're going to typically find better yields and income from flats, terraces, sometimes semis, not always detached, but I'm going to click on detached and just show you a couple of thoughts for that in this example. So just something to consider. So 38 properties there, still at low price. This is a feature property, so we're going to skip past that, and we're now onto detached here. This does look like, interestingly, a bungalow, even though it's shown up on the detached ones. It's 2 bedrooms, 240, So the reason for showing this example is because I'm looking at price differences. So we've got a 2-bedroom detached or a 4-bedroom detached, and there's 240, 340, 350. So the lowest price detached house in the postcode CH1 in Chester is 240,000. The next one is 340,000. So it's quite a jump, although bigger property, more rooms, of course. If you're specifically set on having a detached house, this type of property might be more entry level. Some people, not always to tenants, some homeowners only want detached. If it's in their budget, they like the idea maybe of a little bit more privacy, the idea of sometimes a little bit more space or a little bit more land in terms of garden or off-road parking, things like that. So that could be quite a good fit for that sometimes. So they're the things I'll be kind of looking at. None of these are going to be jumping out as like an amazing rental opportunities because they're higher end price ranges, yields are going to be lower. You don't get a massive increase in yield, rental income, when you've got a semi-detached house that's maybe 3 bedrooms versus a detached house that's 3 bedrooms. Yes, it will rent for more, but it's not going to be significantly more compared to the price you're likely going to have to pay for the asset. So for that, there's nothing here that's really jumping out. It's quite a quick pass on the detached houses. This one is, I'm curious about. I'm not necessarily going to add it straight away, but the look of the property here and the look of the property here, because it's on a slope incline. Yeah, views look really good there. It's a little bit different than your average type of property. Higher price range though, maybe great for a homeowner, nothing jumping out for a buy-to-let. But I just wanted to kind of stop really on the images because it's that really, for me anyway, jumps out when I'm doing this type of shortlist as to image, description, and price point on this kind of headline here. It's those 3 things I'm looking at. And that's it. That's the kind of shortlisting really done for this postcode district of CH1 using different property types, using the map. I'm going to quickly, using the list. I'm going to quickly show you the map function as well. Speed it up in some sections when I've looked at properties. We've slowed down in some sections when I've looked at properties to describe it. But this process, I'd say for this postcode here, we started with about 200 properties plus on Rightmove, 90-ish on Zoopla, 100, what was it on the market? 148. There's more when we didn't have the filters in. That should probably take us about 20 minutes to half an hour. So if we're thinking of this as a weekly task, you can get this done within a short period of time across multiple postcodes. This is using one postcode, 20 minutes, half an hour. You could maybe do a couple of postcodes in one day. Once you've got your short list of potential opportunities, then it's a case of clicking in it and narrowing down further. Also, if you had a particular price range, then you would have been changing that price range straight away at the beginning. You wouldn't have been looking at properties. If you're only looking at say 200 to 300,000, that would cut out anything below that and above that and give you a much tighter shortlist, and you can speed up that process again. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of context in terms of how you can start to pick up the pace when you're doing this shortlist. What we're looking at here is this map. I'm going to add all property types back in, and you can see again how many different kind of properties are in this location. But very quickly, what we'd usually do here is just simply looking for property examples that are mispriced. So if I click on those multiple icons there, you've got a number of properties showing up, 365, 375. If this one was maybe even 350, but 340, 30, 20, 300, that's really interesting because from a comparison point of view, they're very local, much different price. If it was a different price lower, it'll be well worth having a look at. And this is a nice and simple, quick pass. Some lovely properties here, but nothing jumping out in terms of a price difference. And because we're going to be somewhat more realistic in terms of price point, let's reduce this down to 300,000. You can see here we've got one opportunity, which is this bungalow that we found earlier on. So detached houses are not going to be for us on this pass. Let's go to semi-detached houses, do a search. So 200, 290. This one's a 3-bedroom. This one's a 3-bedroom. I quite like that difference. So same area. This one didn't jump out initially when we did the first pass of properties in the list, but I really like the difference in price on these two. I'm sure this one and this one have some other nuances. Could be the size, the condition, the specific location in this area. But I really like that. I'm going to add that one to my list as well. Nothing further up on the map. If we scroll a bit tighter in here. And if you've got this one outlier and there's not any examples, it's hard to try and quickly compare. But it's in a similar region to this one here. So we've got 230. 280. That's a 4-bedroom though. That's a 3-bedroom, 200. Okay, so these two here are lower end, different area to these, and it's not enough of a difference for me to get too excited about it. So I'm just going to leave those there. Okay, cool. So this street here, so 250. 190. We've already got this one added, and 220. So I'd be adding that one if we didn't already have it, but we've already got it listed because the price point is different. We've already got this one added. I quite like that as well. That one's on the market for 190, 2-bed. And this one's 150, 2-bed. Does need work, but I quite like that one. Nothing really there. And that's it. So jump from semi-detached now to terraces. We've got 25 results, and then we're going to do finally apartments using the map filter. Okay, so nothing up there. These are individual properties. There's not a lot grouped together, so it's hard to really find one that jumps out. Wow, that's quite a significant difference. That's a 200,000 3-bed, and that's 125 2-bed, smaller. 230 3-bed, 2-bed again. Nothing really jumping out there. So if it helps, just for clarity, the reason why I skipped over that one, that's 200 and that's 125. We've already added this one, which is good. I really like the price difference, but this is also a 2-bed, so it's a smaller property than the one above it. So sometimes that's on the cusp of whether I would add it using this particular approach, but because we've already added it, I've just continued, left it in. 275, 200, 290, or 190, 150. That's interesting because we've got a 200 here, 2-bed, and this is a 3-bed at 150. We've already added it. That's great. So I'd keep that in. And sometimes these price differences are really obvious because yes, there's a massive price difference, but also it's because it needs a lot of work. And that's the reason why it kind of got that massive price discrepancy. Other times it's not quite as obvious. This one here, 188, it's quite an interesting price. 188, you rarely see, it's usually 180, 185, 190, for example. So that piques my interest. It's a 3-bed. This is a 4-bed, but it's 100 grand extra. It's quite significant. This is a 2-bed close by. I quite like that. I'm going to add that one. Price difference and the pricing amount interests me. Doesn't look amazing in terms of the image of the kind of the property. It looks relatively ordinary. There's no kind of major things that's kind of jumping out there. Okay, that's about it really for those property types. And then this is somewhat harder with the flats because we've got lots more properties. It's a lot type of grouping. So if we scroll out on this map, we might see that they're all condensed, in and around this area. There's one here. Everything else is kind of condensed in this location. 130, 110, 120. So when you've got lots of icons, you'll see here they start to group them together. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of see them. This is 130, this is 110. This is a 1-bedroom, this is kind of a 1-bedroom. So that might be interesting and worth kind of double clicking on. We've already added it, so when we click on it, we can see that one's already added, so that's good. 140, 170, it's quite a difference there. Both 2-beds by the looks of it. If we click on that, we've already added that one. Great. Gets a little bit harder to click on these icons when they're so grouped. 2-bed, 1-bed, quite a big price difference, but same building by the looks of it, although it's different number of property. That's a 2-bed. Salary Way, 2-bed, 285. Here's a 2-bed, 200. That's interesting compared to the 285. Salary Way looks like the same area. It might be because the one that's slightly higher priced is a way better position in the building. Maybe it's a larger 2-bed. Maybe it comes with car parking space and this one doesn't. So there are things to look at, but that's quite a big price difference. I quite like that. So I'm going to add that one in. And again, 2-bed, Salary Way, 175, 172, even lower. So we've gone from 172 2-bed to a 285 2-bed. So that's quite a significant difference there. So something well worth looking at. That's pretty good. 120 versus this 1-bed here, which I liked because of the style of the property. It might be that this one doesn't make sense from a buy-to-let perspective because of the extra price. So when we're doing our next pass of shortlisting, we might end up taking that one out. Okay, this was our studio that we thought was quite highly priced compared to some of the other studios in the list version. That's 150. This is 250, 2-bed. Much larger, of course, 180. So unless this had amazing views, it did say it had reviews, which is good. This one here at 180 for a 1-bed, it's more expensive, but I'd way prefer a 1-bed to a studio. Easier to sell, easier to tenant, just a bit more flexibility in terms of things you can do with it. And it looks like the bed here is priced similar to this 1-bed here as well. So that might be a case of adding both of these and then just comparing them like for like, whether you prefer this type of building or the one above it. But a similar location, similar kind of price points. Nothing kind of really jumping out here. This is a 2-bed for 169. That's a 1-bed for 180. and a 1-bed for 250. Really similar locations. That is quite curious, actually. So I'd look to add that one. And scroll over to this side of the map. So 292 beds, 120. We've already got that one added. But this is also a reason why we keep the number of bedrooms here the same, as in we're not changing it. So it's only 2 bedrooms that we're looking at in this particular filter. And we're adding all bedroom types, because when we're looking at these price comparisons, if we do spot something like here, which is a 2-bed, 1-bed option, it gives us some really interesting data and comparisons to kind of look at versus just looking at the same types of size of properties. That's interesting. 145 looks a lot lower than the others. 2-bed again. So we've already added that one. If we hadn't added it, I would have added it. That one's a 25% share, so we wouldn't include that one anyway. These two, that one's lower. Same location by the looks of it, Edgerton Street. Looks like a similar building style, 2 beds. It's not, though, significantly lower in my mind at this stage that I'd add it. To give a baseline, I'd usually be looking around 15% difference. Ideally 10% is okay. This one's kind of on the cusp of that, and we've got, it feels like, enough apartments in our shortlist as well to kind of make a go of it. If we didn't have lots of stock, I would be adding that one, but we've already got a number of properties here to have a good look at. Just have a quick look down these ones. Looks like the next kind of grouping, nothing there. And then finally, these are where like some of the studio apartments are by the looks of it. Nothing here. And that's it. So if we now come out of this map, let's go back to our list view and look at my Rightmove, and we go to save properties. So we've got here 36 properties. So from the beginning, doing a short list of properties in CH1 Postcode District of Chester, looking for buy-to-let properties that are in good condition and buy-to-let properties that are in a refurb type condition that you can add some value to, whether that's a refurb internally, whether that's some form of extension, maybe even planning gain if there's anything we spot on the descriptions or pictures, or any potential value add that we can do to the floor layouts, which we'll look at in future videos. What we've done here really is narrow down from what was a couple of hundred properties on Rightmove, 100 or so on the market, and then less than 100 on Zoopla, to a short list of 36 properties. Much easier to refine down now from 36 to ones that we actually want to go and view. Now, depending on how active you are, you might want to go and view many of these, 2 of these, completely your choice. We're going to leave this video here for this shortlist. Hopefully it's helped you, give you an indication of not just what properties are on the market in CH1, because maybe you're looking at that location right now, but also how you can use that shortlisting for your location, whatever location you're looking at. So I hope that's helped. Please let me know in the comments below what your locations are, and maybe let me know a postcode district that you'd like me to cover on a next video. So we're looking at all different locations across the country. If there's any locations that you'd really like us to focus on for your buy-to-let investment opportunity, give us a shout, let us know in the comments below, and we'll look at doing that in the next couple of videos. Hope that's helped. Take care and catch you soon. All the best.